Now part of the Darkcast network. Welcome to Indie Podcasts with a dark side. On the night of June 7th, 2021, in Gresham, Oregon, a call came into 911 from a 10-year-old girl frantically telling dispatchers that, quote, her parents were arguing and dad stabbed mom. The dispatcher kept the little girl on the phone, who said that she'd locked her and her siblings in a room away from her dad. She stayed on the phone with the dispatcher until she was sure that her father had left. The dispatcher then urged her to go check on her mother, and under their guidance, she tried to give medical aid. After a short time, first responders arrived and found the children's mother, quote, lifeless and laying face down in a pool of blood with a deep neck wound. The woman's chances at survival were not looking good, and emergency responders transported her to the nearest hospital. Welcome, lambs. Welcome to Love and Murder, Heartbreak to Homicide, your weekly true crime podcast telling you cases of relationships that turn to violence. I am your host, Kai, and in these cases, I try to be the voice of the victim, so I tell these cases usually with passion and raw emotion. So with that in mind, take a seat, take a listen all the way to the end, and if you like my retelling, then don't forget to subscribe. Another way you could subscribe is through our Patreon, patreon.com/Love and Murder. You can either subscribe for free, or you can help be a voice of the victims yourself by choosing one of our bonus tiers, and you'll get bonus episodes, commercial-free episodes, intro-free episodes, and case extras. Plus, in July, I have a new Patreon series coming out, and we have a lot of new things coming to the Patreon, so you don't want to miss it. And like I said, not only that, if you just want to help me get these cases out and be a voice of the victims, then go ahead and join using our bonus tiers, patreon.com/Love and Murder. Now go ahead and grab your butts, grab your favorite glass of apple juice, and let's get into this Love and Murder. Also, before we begin, I do want to say that this case is really short, which I didn't realize that until I was doing the research for it. I saw the headline for this case, and because of the content, I wanted to bring this to you, but I didn't know it was going to be this short. So usually Monday episodes are a bit longer, but this one is shorter, but I think it's more important to get the information out than how long the episode is. So keep that in mind. And because you usually are looking for longer episodes on your Mondays, I will go ahead and use this time to read your comments and get caught up with some of that. So, like I said, apologies. I did not know this case was going to be this short. Now let's get back to the day of the case. Authorities did not release the names of the victim or her children, but thankfully the woman did survive, and so did all of her children. This was largely due to the bravery and quick thinking of the 10-year-old girl. But where was the father? Police launched an extensive search operation, but Manuel Jesus Huchin-Interian had already crossed state lines. When the mother was able, she told investigators what happened. It all started as an argument between her and her boyfriend, Jesus. So some places say it's her boyfriend, some say it's her husband, so I just want to let you know that. He had accused her of cheating. As the argument escalated, Jesus threatened her, saying that he would, quote, finish her and then, quote, finish the kids. What the frick do the kids have to do with it? And you shouldn't even be doing this to her. Even if she's cheating, just leave her then. Why do you think you would have to finish her and finish the kids? Like that, how does that solve any of your problems? So he said this to her, and she probably took it seriously, and then, to her horror, Jesus proceeded to physically attack her and then slit her throat. This attack left the mother with a severe 8-inch cut to her neck. It was then that her 10-year-old daughter grabbed a knife to try and defend her mother, herself, and her siblings. The 10-year-old child has more sense than the father. However, the blade she found was, quote, too dull to be effective. So she quickly changed strategy, dropping the dull knife and focusing on a new plan, getting herself and her younger siblings to safety. That's when she ushered them into the bedroom, locked the door, and barricaded it. So this girl had all kind of sense. First, she wanted to protect her mom and her siblings. Second, when she realized she couldn't protect her mom against somebody bigger than her with an ineffective weapon, then she decided, okay, the best course of action is to at least save my siblings. And this grown man, which it didn't say how old he was, but still he's a grown man, couldn't make a logical decision. Like, okay, even if this woman is cheating on me, I'm just going to say, hey, I wasted how many years of my life, whatever, and I'm going to leave and I'm going to wallow in anger or self-pity somewhere else, not kill the kids and kill her. So you're telling me a 10-year-old is smarter than you. So that was the story. That's how all of this started. And now Jesus is no longer in Oregon. Unfortunately, for the next 3 years, he remained at large. And throughout this time, the family lived on the edge. Because can you believe that? Can you imagine this person who did this, threatened you and threatened your children, can't be found now? So yeah, I would be living on the edge too. The trail went cold despite multiple agencies collaborating in the search effort. Investigators believed he was probably using fake names or relied on friends to remain hidden. Which brings me to my question. Who would protect their friend who slit his girlfriend's throat and threatened to kill kids? What kind of friend is going to help you out in that kind of situation? You can't even find friends to loan you money or just tell you the truth. But some people can find friends to house them and hide them, knowing now they're breaking the law by aiding and abetting. And not only that, somebody who did something so heinous, that's insane. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not that friend. I am not that friend. So don't come to me. Finally, in March 2024, investigators caught a break in the case and found Jesus in San Francisco, California. He was arrested, and they confirmed his identity through fingerprint analysis and other identification methods. Within weeks of his arrest, they extradited his butt right back to Oregon. There, prosecutors wasted no time in moving forward with the case. They were like, look, it's been 3 years. We have no time to waste. On April 18th, 2025, Jesus entered a guilty plea to assault in the second degree, constituting domestic violence. Then he accepted a plea deal just days before his trial was set to start. This last-minute decision spared the victim and her children from having to relive the traumatic events throughout the trial testimony. Now, reports didn't let us know exactly what the plea deal was about, so I don't know if he did this to be selfish or he did it to actually spare the kids from going through the testimony and stuff. But to be honest, if he wasn't trying to be selfish, he would have turned himself in 3 years ago. So I'm prone to believe that whatever the deal was, it was in his favor. However, under the ballot measure 11, which is an Oregon measure requiring a mandatory minimum sentence of at least 70 months for certain crimes, it looks like Jesus isn't getting off as he thought he would. This voter-approved law removes judicial discretion in some cases, requiring fixed prison terms regardless of individual circumstances. So, even with the plea agreement, judges couldn't reduce Jesus' sentence below the statutory minimum, 70 months. The law aims to standardize punishment for serious offenses across the state, ensuring consistent consequences for violent crimes like a throat-slashing attack, for instance. So, on April 28th, he was sentenced to 70 months in prison, which is 5 years, followed by 3 years of probation. But my thing is, there was a minimum, not a maximum. So you gave this guy who attempted murder and threatened murder on multiple individuals, including children, only 70 months. Isn't there any child abuse charges that you could have thrown in there or something like that? Now, it's interesting to note that psychologically speaking, children exposed to such violence often experience lasting effects, including post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and feelings of terror, isolation, guilt, and helplessness. So that's what I'm saying. This guy completely screwed these children up, and he only got 70 months in prison. Multnomah County Senior District Attorney Robin Bex Skarstad, who prosecuted the case, acknowledged the heroism displayed by the young girl. Quote, "This case underscores the devastating impact domestic violence has on children in the home. The victim's young daughter showed bravery and resilience that truly inspires us to work hard every day to interrupt the cycle of abuse and keep families safe." Domestic violence cases usually follow predictable patterns of escalation. For instance, this case, how Jesus's rage progressed from accusations of infidelity to verbal confrontation to physical violence and ultimately to attempted murder. Law enforcement officials say that this case shows why immediate intervention is critical in domestic disputes. Now, with that said, law enforcement needs to take that under serious consideration as well, because sometimes they get calls of domestic abuse and it could take however long to get out there, or somebody is going to the office to ask for a restraining order. They don't give it to them. You know, we've just had many cases of some departments that let the domestic abuse fall between the cracks. And I'm not saying blanket statement police. I'm saying some departments. And that is the case of a guy who decided that murdering his girlfriend, who he said cheated on him. Now, there's no proof of this. He just said she cheated on him. There was nothing that came out that said she actually was. But he decided, based on his paranoia or whatever reason he figured she was cheating, even if he did have a video, a clear as day video of her cheating on him while her children were at home taking care of themselves or whatever, murder is still not the answer. So either way it goes, like, you still didn't make a logical choice. And then you did this in front of the kids. And then your kid felt that she had to jump in and save the day, like save her own mother and save her siblings. Could you imagine as a child if this happened to you and you feel like you're the line of defense in the house? Can you even imagine what that would do to you? And so if you imagine what that would do to you, think about this little girl. But I wanted to do this case because, I mean, you heard the content, how brave she was. And I wanted to say you are very, very brave. And I really hope you keep that bravery up. And I really hope you're getting some mental health help so that this doesn't affect you continuing on into adulthood. You are very, very, very brave little girl. And I'm sure your mother is so happy and hugs you every day. And so do your siblings. So this is why I wanted to do this case, because I just couldn't believe this is what, I mean, I say I couldn't believe, but I've done way worse cases, but still each case in itself is like as surprising. One would think that I should just be used to stuff like this, but no, I'm not. It's just, I just can't get over some people's thought process, you know? So anyway, that was the case of Jesus Huchin-Interian. What do you think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And you heard my thoughts. As always, whenever you get a case from me, you hear my thoughts. So I want to hear yours. In the meantime, since this episode was so short, I'm going to go ahead and get caught up with some of your comments. So first of all, last week's episode, and because also I'm going to be reading a lot of comments, I'm not going to put the link to them in the show notes below, because then it'll be like a list, like a long list. So you can find, I'm going to say each episode title, and you can literally do a search on whatever platform you're listening on, and you could listen to that episode if you missed it. Normally, I would put a link to each episode that I'm reading your comments on, but it's going to be a long list. So just listen for the title, or at least listen for the name, and you can just search that. In this episode, going forward, I will always have your links there. So I had a poll out last week about the case of Lori Shaver. Remember where Michael Shaver went missing and Lori was like, I don't know. He said he didn't want anything to do with us anymore. And in the end, she blamed her daughter and she blamed her ex-husband. I think it was her ex-husband. So the poll that I put out is, do you think she murdered him? Do you think her daughter murdered him, as she said, and her daughter testified? Or do you think her ex-husband did? And 100% of y'all said that Lori did, which of course she did. And I cannot believe that she threw her daughter under the bus like that. Do you see what I'm saying? How one would think that I'm used to this? I will never be used to this. So that was the results of the poll question for last week's episode. So the first comment I'm going to read comes from the episode of the murder of Amora Bain Carson. And if you remember that one, a Texas baby was tortured for 30 hours by her mother and her mother's boyfriend. And Nezuko Bites says, as I look at my 13-year-old son, I just don't understand that poor, sweet baby girl. Everyone involved failed her, including the bystanders. Which I agree, Nezuko, because in a lot of these episodes I do where people know what's happening, they don't do anything. That I can't understand. I cannot understand that. Because I'm going to do something, even if it's just to call the police and report it and not actually physically touch somebody, because it could go awry if you physically touch somebody. You know, they could then start focusing on you instead of focusing on the issue at hand. But they could say, hey, you assaulted this person, and then the whole focus is on you instead of what you were trying to save a child from, instead of what you were trying to save a child from. You understand what I'm saying? So even if it's just the minimum to call law enforcement and report what I saw, I'm going to do something. And who knows, I might even follow up like, hey, did y'all ever go out to such and such a place where I saw somebody putting a cigarette out on top of a baby's head? Did y'all ever follow up on that, you know? So anyways, I do agree with you. The next comment I'm going to read comes from the case of Jeannie Whitefeather and Donald Lance. So I did a full episode on this, and just recently, I think, has it even been a month, I did an update episode on this case. And this case was of this couple who adopted 5 Black children and basically treated them like slaves. And they moved from, I can't remember where they moved from. They moved from, was it Washington State to someplace else, and then ultimately ended up in West Virginia. I remember West Virginia because I believe their thought process was, oh, these West Virginians think just like us and they're going to let us get away with it. So let's move out in the sticks with these West Virginians or whatever. You know what I'm saying? They believed the hype of what you see in movies, and they thought they were going to get away with it in West Virginia. And West Virginia said, oh yeah, hold my apple juice. And they were one of the few people who actually called and reported continuously until something was done. So if you want to hear that episode, just go ahead and search for that. Adopted for slavery, then sentenced for human trafficking and abuse. That's the title of that case. Husna said, the children were failed by everyone, starting from the original people that brought them to this world, knowing they couldn't take care of them, followed by CPS, then the monsters come last. If I'm in a relationship with someone who tries this, I will be the first to report them. Shame on them for what they did to these children. So, Husna, I don't really think they were failed by their parents. I mean, I guess I get what you're saying in terms of if you knew you couldn't take care of the children, why did you have 5 of them? But in reality, you never know what happens in people's lives. They could have been fine. They could have been completely fine, had a good job and everything. And then the economy took a nosedive or whatever happened and they lost their job and they thought the best way to take care of their children was to give them up to people who they thought could take care of them better, you know? So I wouldn't necessarily blame the parents unless it came out like the parents were neglecting them. So I wouldn't blame the parents. With that being said, I cannot remember if in the episode I did say where the children came from. So again, unless it was said that their parents were neglecting them and CPS took them, then I wouldn't blame the parents for this. Everybody else, yes. But still, shout out to those West Virginians. You know what I'm saying? Shout out. The next comment that I have from you actually comes from a bonus episode. So this one, I will leave the link to in the show notes below because it's on a whole different platform. It's on my Patreon. So that one, I'm going to leave the link to that one in the show notes below. And this bonus episode was freaking insane. So basically the TLDR of this episode was that 2 toddlers were thrown over a balcony and plummeted 15 floors to their death. And the person who did it was their father. And you will not believe the reason why and how he tried to get away with it too. So that was the case of Zhang. For this one, I will leave the link in the show notes below. But Brian said, I find the death penalty, wherever administered, to be barbaric. I'm sure, in this case, life in solitary confinement in a Chinese prison would prove adequate punishment. So my thing with that is he gets to live out the rest of his days in peace. Well, I guess it'd be a Chinese prison, so it might not be in peace. I don't think Chinese prisons are like U.S. prisons. But ultimately, I think the decision should have been left to the mother. Whatever the mother decides, if the mother was like life or death penalty, then that choice should be up to the mother and not us, the public, who this didn't happen to. But either way, thank you for your comment, Brian. We don't always have to agree on everything. That's what comments are about. It's not about you agreeing with me. It's about, I want to hear what y'all have to say. So thank you for your comment. The next comment I have is for last week's episode, which was the case of Sheila Keene. And that one was titled, The Killer Clown Case, How Marlene Warren Was Murdered at Her Front Door. And Christina Bobo, which I haven't heard from you in a while, girl, Christina Bobo, she said she basically got away with it, shaking my head. All those years that she got to live as a free woman, Marlene did not. It's a slap in the face for the family. Poor son. Dad married his mom's killer. I believe the husband had involvement too. He may have had an alibi, but he's guilty. So I hear what you're saying, Christina, and I did leave you a comment asking you why did you think he's guilty, because I want to hear why you thought because I want to hear your thought process on that. I think he's completely oblivious and just, I was going to say something, but it is going to be cursing somebody out, so I'm not going to say that. But I think he's just completely oblivious. I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind once I read your response to my question, but I don't know if I would go as far as saying I think he had something to do with it. I'm not really sure if he did or not, but you may change my mind. And it was nice hearing from you, Christina. I so miss your comments. And I know, just like me, everybody has life that gets in the way and you can't always comment. But I do keep track of the people who comment a lot, and it feels like I'm just talking to one of my friends. So when you're missing, then I'm like, oh, my friend is gone and I miss you. So thanks for your comments, Christina. And the next comment I'm going to read comes from like my second episode that we ever did. I'm so ashamed. I don't want to tell y'all to even go back and listen to it because it was just chaos. It doesn't even sound like a podcast. It just sounds like chaos. But anyway, this is the case of James Wayburn Hall, who they called Big Jim, and he was a serial killer. Husna said, that's scary, and his motive is even scarier. Husna, thanks for your comment. Yeah, a lot. I mean, serial killer, that's already scary. If you just hear serial killer, that's already scary. And then when you get into the motives, and I guess the terror level varies based on people's motives. But go back and, oh God, I don't want to say go back and listen to this episode because like I said, it's terrible. Our retelling of it is terrible. We were just getting our footing. It is the second episode, so we didn't know what we were doing. But either way, it's the second episode of Love and Murder. And thank you for your comment. And the last comments that I'm going to read comes from the case of a 17-year-old baby who was abused to death while under social services watch. You heard correctly. And this was the case of baby P. So Vicky Stevenson said, which Vicky, I haven't heard from you in a while either. I hope everything's well with you, Vicky. Vicky Stevenson said, Oh my God, I wish you and I could sit together and discuss with disgust about this. Love your shows, Vic. Thank you, Vicky. I do look forward to your comments too. And some people think that when I shout out some of my lambs who leave comments regularly that I know these people. I've never met them in my life. I don't know Vicky Stevenson in person, and I don't know Christina Bobo in person. But like I said, when you're a regular commenter, then I feel like I'm talking to friends. So I shout you out like you my girl or my boy. You hear me? So Vicky, I miss you. I haven't heard from you in a while. Thank you for your comment. And on the same case, Christina Bobo said, I can't even finish this episode. Just hearing that he swallowed a tooth after being punched in the face. 17 months old. We need to start an eye for an eye in these monsters. Look, Christina, like I said, sometimes I need to take a break even when I'm researching cases or I'm recording cases or I'm editing cases because I've been doing this 5 years now, so I've kind of gotten good with, as y'all know my phrase, not letting it sink in, but some cases sink in, you know. Then all I could do is watch Disney Channel and hug my child, and that's literally all I can do. And that is all I have for you today. Remember, if you are experiencing domestic violence, to call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. That's 1-800-799-7233. Or go to thehotline.org. All calls are toll-free and confidential, and the hotline is available 24/7 in more than 170 languages. I know from another episode, they said don't say to leave. That could be hard, but you do need to speak with someone. You do need to get some type of help, and these lines could help you. Don't forget that if you like my retelling, that you can subscribe using our Patreon, patreon.com/Love and Murder. You can be a free subscriber where you do get some benefits for being a free subscriber. But if you want the most bang for your buck, then go ahead and choose one of our bonus tiers. Not only do you get extras, but you also help to be a voice of the victim. So basically, when I'm speaking out against the atrocities that are happening, then you're speaking out against the atrocities that are happening. So, like I said, you could do that by choosing any one of our bonus tiers, patreon.com/Love and Murder. Also in July, we have some new things dropping in the Patreon, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. So go ahead and check that out. And like I end every full episode, I want to remind you that it's, say it with me now, all love and no murder, y'all. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for your support. And also thanks so much for your patience as I use the AI Jane, Jensen, and Jessica for Wednesdays and Fridays episodes. I really appreciate you all. Y'all have no idea how much I appreciate all of you. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye.